First of all, the state legislature is taking up some significant bills this week around the future of Metro, and the county council is very strongly in favor of the legislature resolving the funding crisis and putting in place a long-term funding solution with bondable revenue from the state of Maryland. And if we can match that with Virginia and DC, we will make a big step forward on what is, without a doubt, the region's most important transportation priority and Montgomery County's most important transportation priority. So it's going to be a big week. There'll be hearings in Annapolis, and I will be testifying. Other council members will be testifying. Prince George's and Montgomery County are working together closely, and we're very pleased with the leadership from members of the delegation from Montgomery County in moving this issue forward. So we're very optimistic about what can happen, but we've got our work cut out for us over the next few weeks to build consensus. Next issue, very, an issue we've been grappling with for some time is the question of the future of cell phone coverage and infrastructure that is necessary or recommended by the industry to facilitate the growth in demand for wireless coverage and data. And as you know, the industry is shifting from large towers that you can see when you're on the highway to smaller antennas that are placed on buildings or on telephone poles. And it's been a source of great controversy in communities that don't have telephone poles and that have very aesthetically refined streetlight fixtures, and they have a certain built environment. And the request from the industry would enable them to replace those dainty poles with potentially large, significant antennas. And that's been a real source of concern. So the county executive has been working on this for some time, and on the agenda this week at the council is a zoning change that would respond to concerns of the community by not making changes in neighborhoods that have underground utilities, and basically enabling infrastructure to come into urban areas and on existing poles without really without addressing this question of communities that don't have telephone poles in the first place. So we're going to be taking this up, and we've previously worked on this issue. What I wanted to observe is, for the last year or more, I've been serving on the FCC's Intergovernmental Affairs Advisory Committee, and we have also been grappling with the future of small cell infrastructure and the desire by the industry to take away local control. And they are seeking to take away local control over this infrastructure's placement in right-of-ways or on buildings. They're seeking to take away local control at the FCC through regulation and at the state level through legislation. And they have passed legislation across this country in many states recently that removes the local government from the table over how infrastructure would be deployed. And we are aware that they are working hard to introduce legislation in the Maryland legislature. And of course, the Federal Communications Commission is nearing the conclusion of its recommendation process with a committee that has been stacked by the industry to recommend codes that would, again, leave out local government, from the decision-making process. So we are very concerned about preserving local control, and it makes a big difference if the community is at the table enforcing co-location. So you don't have 3 antennas put up on 3 different poles on one block. You've got one pod with 3 antennas inside of it. That really reduces the proliferation of the equipment. Or through negotiation, you have a requirement that the industry place equipment in communities that are underserved. These are some of the benefits that can come from local control, and it's why we want to preserve local control. But in order to preserve local control, we need to use our local control. And so the zoning change that is before you begins the process of reformulating how infrastructure will be deployed and the demand for data can be met in the future. It is true that demand for data is growing exponentially. The very simple explanation is video. If you watch video on your phone or on your tablet or on your laptop, then you are driving the demand for more wireless coverage. And that's what's happening, every day. And it's growing exponentially. So, people aren't going to be able to watch video with the existing approach of very large towers that can't fit in but very few places. And that's the kind of fundamental problem. So those are the 2 issues that I wanted to just talk about a little bit, and I welcome any questions you might have.
You talk about local control and getting it back. Would that include making every time someone applies for one of these things a more public and something that people have input on, hearings?
Oh, yeah.
I know in the past, they've been zoning text amendments, and the complaints from citizens have been these things slide under the radar. That is their.
Well, we have already taken a lot of steps to bring transparency to this process. The county's committee, called the Tower Committee, that works on that infrastructure, has begun to publish a map showing where all the applications are. I'm looking for, I guess, Mitzi, which, using the open data publishing tools that we have, now no one should ever be surprised if there's an application for the installation of infrastructure, in their community, because we're sharing that information publicly. And I think previously there was a concern that people weren't hearing about those applications. When the industry put one in, people were having to, how was the community finding out? So that was something we responded to very quickly. We're going through a process together of figuring out how to handle this and how to address this. And one of the first requests that we had from the community was transparency. We want to know every application so that we can participate fully.
But are there public hearings on each application? Do they have input?
Do they have input into each application? I'm not going to invite Mitzi to come to the table, but what this would do would be to enable in urban areas, along telephone poles, infrastructure to be placed based on certain standards. And then if the infrastructure doesn't meet those standards, then they have to apply for a Board of Appeals approval, which requires a public hearing. So it is retaining the public hearing for those installations that we think are of community concern.
Some of the criticism of these antennas comes from a public health fear, that people fear that radiation from these antennas is going to, cause cancer or some other type of disease. So do you feel like a bill like this could be a compromise for people who fear that not just, 500 antennas, but just one antenna is an issue?
Part of the challenge here is that the county is not able to legislate on the basis of public health concerns. We have been specifically preempted, or our local control on that issue does not exist. We do not have local control if we act on the basis of health concerns. The county executive and I met with the chairman of the FCC, Mr. Pai, and we urged Mr. Pai to complete a study of the health effects of the wireless infrastructure. And we think that that really should happen, and that would help address concerns about the health effects. So I'm not sure, I want the FCC to follow through on that. They really need to do it.
Well, what did he tell you? Did he say the FCC will study it?
They said, that's very interesting. You know, we understand we understand the connection between community concerns and the infrastructure. And so we will consider whether we will indeed finish the study.
Did you get any feeling that the FCC is just going to assert the power that many say they have and just put these in here without?
I think so. I mean, absolutely, right? I mean, I think the Trump pie FCC is going to try to take away local control over wireless infrastructure. That's my strong feeling. And I think we don't want the state legislature to be acting in the same manner. So we can sit back and wait for them, or we can grapple with this issue and address it ourselves and demonstrate that local government can use its local control effectively. That's the challenge that we have.
Did the commissioner of the FCC tell you that you take away local control?
He did not give us a clear indication in our conversation with him, but if you follow his comments and the committee and the processes that he's created, I think you can get a sense of where he's headed.
When did you meet with him?
This was back in the summer, right? In May, last May. So we've been fighting for local control. You know, we're fighting for it day in and day out. We're fighting for it through the FCC. We're fighting for it in the state legislature, and we're fighting for it, you know, any way that we can. But again, if you want to retain local control, you need to exert local control.
I'd like to ask you about something that's not on your agenda, with Channel 4. We were sent a memo that was sent out by the fire chief in Montgomery County on Friday outlining some pretty serious sexual harassment allegations that are taking place in fire stations in Montgomery County against contract custodial staff. And in his memo, he says that these actions are unacceptable and inappropriate, flirting, talking about DACA, making people feel unwelcome, vulgar, inappropriate sexual comments being made towards the custodial staff. Apparently they're on contract with the county to go in and clean fire stations, and they're being subjected to this kind of harassment. We're waiting to speak to the fire chief directly about this, but they've acknowledged that this was sent out to the entire Montgomery County Fire Rescue Department. I don't know if you're aware of it, but we're looking for some kind of comment about this, and considering the fact it's the contract with a cleaning company, you know, would the county have some control over this? And
Yeah.
have you been made aware of any inappropriate actions against these workers?
No, I have not. This is unfortunately the first time hearing about it, and it's good that the chief has sent out this letter, and there should be zero tolerance for harassment or discrimination, and we expect our department to enforce the values of this county, you know, fully. So I'm going to have to explore that, but
Is that something that anyone has brought up to the county that you've heard of?
it could be that the Public Safety Committee has heard about this, but
Who
has not been to, several council members are on that committee, so
You're not a part of it?
I'm not on that committee yet.
Okay. Is this something you would address potentially as a council member?
If there was an opportunity for the council to help clarify what the standards of our, what standards of conduct are, I would look to do that for sure.
Is there any type of training that anyone that works for the county goes through as to, you know, being more open to diversity, or, you know, is there some type of classes or something that they have to go through so they know that, you know, they can't disclose any type of comments like these?
Oh, absolutely. You know, we have HR training, we have employee training. Whether that training is sufficient, I think, is a question we must always review. And, you know, if there are allegations, then I think we need to take them very seriously and follow up on it. So, according to my staff, the county employees have harassment have training about harassment issues every 3 years as part of their employment.
Would that be for the fire department, or would they have like a separate training, do you think?
Yeah, we'll have to find that out.
Yeah, would that apply to volunteers as well as the professional
We
fire
can find
staff?
that out.
Yeah. There's a lot of information here that we need to look into for you, so.
Can I go back to the small cell antennas really quickly? This might be a stupid question, but what does utilities have to do with the small cell antennas, and why is that part of the ZTA?
Well, utility poles.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
frequently the antennas are placed on existing telephone poles or utility poles. And so the challenge is a lot of communities were built without them. And frankly, they don't want them. So this ZTA does not allow for them to be placed where there are not telephone poles.
If I can, something completely unrelated, Amazon, latest on Amazon. There's a lot of speculation as to where in the county this might go. There is, and forgive me, has there been some kind of signed agreement that public officials cannot comment on the discussions you're having with Amazon? There are some folks who are very concerned about transparency in this, and that the state, the county, are ready to give away the store to get these jobs.
Well, I think that there is a confidentiality agreement for the parties that are involved in the actual negotiation. I'm not aware that council members have signed any agreement, but the county is not going to, let's see. We have reviewed in a general sense the incentives that have been offered, and my basic point is incentives are part of the package. They're not really the fundamental offer that the county has. The real offer that we have is the quality of life here and the capacity or the skills of our workforce. And incentives are part of a conversation, but they're not the driving factor. And from a fiscal perspective, the return on investment, the upside for the county, needs to be there. This is not going to be a money-losing proposition for the state of Maryland or for Montgomery County. And I don't think anyone would support it if it was. So, yeah.
My
So if you
understanding
haven't
is
signed
there's,
it, well, I was going to say, if you haven't signed anything and they're not the major part of the incentive package, can you say what the incentives are?
The Prime Act is in the state of Maryland legislature, and I think you can review what's in there. And
Is the county offering any incentives on top of what the state is offering?
I think I'm going to have to send you to the county executive for that.
You're
For that
unaware of
question. I'm going to have to send you to the county executive for that. Yeah.
in terms of improvements on the red line, my understanding is there are discussions about
Yeah.
improvements on the red line, and people are going, aha, that's where it's going to be, somewhere between Grosvenor and Twin Brook and White Flint. Do we have a
Oh.
location yet for the Amazon facility?
No, Amazon has to make a decision about what it's looking for, right? It's not a situation where we can tell them, well, we're demanding that you go here.
But have they been in discussions with you about, we kind of like White Flint, tell us about it? Have they talked to you about these?
I can't comment on locations.
Because?
Because the location that we're pitching them is Montgomery County, Maryland. And we're excited about the prospect of bringing them to Montgomery County, Maryland. And there are lots of places that they could grow their company here in the future. And, we'd welcome their arrival.
Anybody else?
Okay. Thank you very much.